It looks like Richard's shadowing us as well, eh? Well, good morning, everybody. Just waiting for everybody to come online to this webinar, Asbestos, Developing a Robust System for Dealing with It. Just give a few more seconds for people to come online. All right, everybody, welcome to this this webinar. As I said, it's about asbestos. Health and safety first. If there's a fire, please check the fire exit nearest to you. No, I'm just joking, just pulling your leg. I want to introduce our speaker. We're very fortunate to have Steve Eldon Gray with us today to actually talk about asbestos. As a property manager, you need to be aware of the impact and importance of identifying and managing asbestos in the rental properties that you manage. This webinar will help you to understand more about your responsibilities. With Steve with us, he'll teach us the basics on developing a robust process to deal with this material. Now, about Steve, he's had 7 years frontline asbestos surveying and assessor experience, and having delivered a large variety of asbestos projects across New Zealand, he's qualified as a asbestos assessor license. Has one from the WorkSafe New Zealand. And the company he works for, Trace Asbestos, has started to assist to simplify the asbestos regulations, requirements, and challenges from the face home and business owners that they face, project and facility managers, removalist and construction trades. Now, before I hand over, just want to remind everybody that there is a question and answer box at the bottom of the screen. Please, if you've got any questions, use it, but we're actually going to do something a little bit different this session. When I hand over to Steve, we will be asking right off the top if you've got any questions, and this will help direct the webinar this morning. So if you've got any questions burning that you want to ask straight away, well, here's your opportunity. So Steve, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. So today we're going to cover off some of the myths of asbestos and some of the do's and don'ts, and well, I guess where do we sit on that? What do we do? What do we not do? So I guess, was there any questions straight up? I guess it's a bit like, how do I know where the questions are? Yeah, well, do I hear them?
We're doing something a little bit different out of the box, Steve. So probably they can't talk to us, unfortunately. It's not an interactive one.
Yep.
But so yeah, no, there's nothing that's people have rushed to put up there. So
that's cool. All right, so I'll start with I guess one of the most common myths I get with investment properties or rental properties is the fact that they don't need one of these. They've been told by somebody that it's not a requirement, and that's technically probably correct. The asbestos regulations do sit underneath the WorkSafe Act, and because it's not a workplace, that doesn't apply to, I guess, the tenants in the building, or I guess you as the owner. However, that gets a little bit of a grey area, because most investment properties are conducting a business, what known as a PCBU, or a person conducting a business or an undertaking as such. So therefore, the tenant's not covered by the WorkSafe Act, but as soon as you engage somebody to do any work on that property, so all your maintenance, repairs, any tradesperson you you engage, that's where you are obligated to know where the asbestos is and how to keep them safe. The other thing that often comes into that is you don't really want other people coming into your property and disturbing the asbestos. So whether that's the tenants or tradespeople, then that's where you want to know where that is. So one of the easiest things we find is to conduct the survey. Now, there is a couple of surveys that are, I guess we probably should explain the different types of surveys in New Zealand. So we have generally intrusive surveys and non-intrusive. So the intrusive surveys are for any planning of demolition or renovation. So you are looking behind items and discovering all the asbestos that may affect that project, whereas your non-intrusive stuff is known as a management survey, and that's all your general just access areas. Now, you don't actually have to sample to have a survey done. You can have a visual survey, which would presume that claddings or sophites or roofing materials or vinyls inside are asbestos. So you just have them documented based on the appearance of them or the look of them, and treat them as such, and only test them when you need to do repairs or maintenance to those areas. So that's kind of where we sit with that. Generally, in behind that survey is where we then put a management plan in place, and so that would have all the procedures and all the do's and don'ts about where those things are. So you may have a floor plan that says the kitchen vinyl is going to be treated as asbestos, and therefore we're not to do any work on that until we can do that testing. The testing would then take place, which would then either confirm it's asbestos or eliminate it. The work can proceed. So that's kind of where that kind of sits. Yeah, what else? Where do we go from here, I guess? Sorry, can you hear that? Yep.
Yep. There's a question. What are the traps for young players, for new property managers in the industry?
What are the what? Sorry.
What are the traps for the young or inexperienced property managers? Yeah.
So one of the traps would be not dealing with it or not having measures in place. So that's where, like, if you ask someone, do you know what asbestos you have? If they can't answer those questions, that's where kind of the risk comes in, or that is a trap. Knowing where the asbestos is doesn't necessarily make it. A lot of people avoid the question, but if you know where it is, it's in a good condition, it's been assessed, it's been you've got a plan in place, then that's the best tip I can offer, is having it there. If you don't need to use that information, it can just sit there. It can be a 5-year plan. It's just there, you know where it is. As soon as the question comes up, any tradesperson coming in, any tenant coming in, do you know if there's any asbestos? Yes, I have that. You have this plan you roll out. So having that plan is very good for when you need it. If you then have to react to that question and then have to go find that information, then that's where you have a delay in the trades being carried out, or you have issues with the perception or the vulnerability of people not knowing that it could or couldn't be asbestos. Yeah, so that's probably a very good trick to have. Also, that document generally will give the condition of the asbestos. So most asbestos is in good condition. Most asbestos is low risk or no risk if it's not being disturbed or touched. So that's another important thing to know. If you know where it is and know it's not being touched, then that's where it is. If it was in a higher condition of the condition was at a low, at a low condition, and it was in need of being replaced, then that's where you can take action on that, I suppose. That's another one to do there. Yeah.
Okay. For a new property manager, would new houses have asbestos in it these days? You wouldn't think so, would you?
No, so that's a very good question. So our legislation is around, so anything constructed post 2000, the building regulations here specify it would have been non-asbestos. So 2000 onwards is an automatic no asbestos given to that property. Anything before that gets a little bit of a, again, it's a grey area. So asbestos in New Zealand probably wasn't used till about the 1940s. So a lot of people then, I guess another myth would be because it's constructed, I've got a 1910s house, there'll be no asbestos there. So that's probably true on the original construction. However, these very little houses that were built in 1910 that are still in that original condition. They would have had kitchens updated, bathrooms updated, extensions put on them. Those building materials that would have been renovated between 1940 and the late 80s, there's a high chance that those materials then contained asbestos. Again, there's nothing wrong with those materials. They're good materials, but as they come towards the end of their life span or things are getting refreshed, that's when there's the most risk there. So between the late 80s and 2000 is when there's a bit of a grey zone. Generally, there's not asbestos used in those materials. However, there was a bit of a stockpile of materials. So anything from the late 80s to 2000 is what we call that window of phasing out those products and having a definite line there. So 1990s, we have a lot of those buildings that also fit into the leaky building category. As those repairs are done, that's where that testing takes place. I encourage you to do the testing. A lot of people don't want to do the testing because of the cost, but most of the time that testing will be a golden ticket for you because it'll come back as negative, prove it's not there. You then can then deal with those products and have got the evidence to back you up that you've done the right thing. The tradespeople can do it. You can dump those materials. There's the documentation that goes with saying that there is no asbestos there.
Okay.
That's a very good question, that one.
Oh, of course. What I'm going to do is I'll actually try and share some photos of some asbestos products, and you might like to comment on some of them, especially whether they're prevalent today or not. I'll try and do this. Whoops. I think I've got to ask Micah if she can give me ability to share. Host disabled participant screen. Dear oh dear. Micah, hello. There we go. Sorry about that.
It's all right.
All right, now I'll try and find it here somewhere. So what's this? Can everyone see that? I wonder. Can you see that? Steve?
Yeah, I can see that. Yes. Yep.
All right. So this is some cladding, some photos of some asbestos material. I don't know how. It'd be interesting to know from you, as been in the industry for a while, how prevalent this type of asbestos is.
Yeah, so I suspect that is what we call the fake brick cladding. It's cement sheeting, so that is a very common asbestos product. That's again, in that condition, it's not in a bad condition. There's a couple of things property managers, maintenance people, is probably maintaining that. So water blasting is a prohibited item. Water blasting it actually releases the fibers into the area, the fibers you can't see that you breathe in. They're a problem. So soft washing that with maybe a chemical wash or just a light brush would be the best way to clean that or maintain that product. Again, so that's a very common fake brick product. Same with the other claddings would be the flat sheet cement stuff. We've got wooden battens in there or plastic joiners. That's the same material we often see in the sophites. Very common around entranceways, porches, all that sort of stuff, garages. And also we see that in behind stucco as well, stucco products. Cool. On to the next one. Yep. I'm not sure what
this is what we probably find in a lot of asbestos products. If you see things that crack like this, it's a bit of a warning sign, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So when it's cracked, so I guess if it's a recent damage, I guess that's where that management plan would have procedures in place. So the procedures would be to isolate that area, have someone who's going to come clean it up. So I mean, there's a couple of immediate things you could do. So we have a product called Fiber Lock. It's a little spray can. It's an airless can. We can seal up those cracks, and that would lock in those joins so they're not moving and they haven't got that. If you haven't got that product, even something like glue or paint also over those areas would do it as well. So that's only a temporary fix though. That's not going to paint it and then leave it. But that just seals in any fibers so they can't be released. And then you would get that product taken care of by a proper person who has the qualifications or the knowledge to exit that material out of that location.
I've never heard that, but again, it takes away the fear that the tenant might have if they think that the fibers are floating around in the air, wouldn't they?
Well, exactly. And again, and this is why if that was a cement board inside, I guess, and it's like a hallway or inside the thing, if it was a cement panel, it was, at this point, you'd presume it's asbestos, then it's fine. It's nothing wrong with it. But if it got damaged during it could be an earthquake, a storm, just activity in the house, if you've got a process to deal with that, it can be easily dealt with. It could, as I say, painting over those joins can be done in about half an hour of someone being called out. It's a very temporary fix, and then because any removal may take several weeks by the time you book it in and arrange for that to be done, and also have someone come in and do the repair afterwards as well. So yeah, having those processes is quite important. So you've got a ceiling tile there, plaster tile.
That's mainly would be commercial, wouldn't it? Something like that.
Well, it is commercial, but saying that, you do see that stuff inside apartments. So inside apartments. So it could be residential, but yeah, that is a very common commercial office type situation. That's a hard one. I would probably say most of the time on them, the product's going to come back as negative on those plaster tiles. A lot of the training we do is UK based. In the UK, they are often asbestos. In New Zealand materials, they are more often than not negative. So that's one of those products where you assume it's to be, but testing would actually probably be an advantage to remove it off your asbestos register.
Okay. And then we had that phase, didn't we? We had all these ceilings that were people decided
so the textured ceilings, plaster ceilings, popcorn ceilings, these are quite we get a lot of concerns over tenants going into properties about these products, especially with young kids. We have a lot of people who can look at these products and say that's definitely is or definitely isn't, and I'll shut down a myth here now. There's no way to tell. I can test 100 of these ceilings in a row, and I could not tell you which way. I couldn't put $100 on each test to tell you to win the lottery, so to speak of. This material has to go under a 400 zoom microscope to see the fibers inside it. It's a very fine fiber. It's not always asbestos. I mean, probably 60% of the time it is, but it's not always. So there's again another thing. The problem we have with this product, though, to take a sample, you're going to have to take a scraping of it, which leaves a mark behind. So this is a classic case where you would presume it to be asbestos, treat it as asbestos, but only test it when you need it to. So there are some problems with that because you're going to assume a product is there when it's not asbestos. So this is quite a problem for people. Most people get rid of this product out of their buildings when they've got the first opportunity. So if you're doing a renovation project and you've got this particular material, test it early, get it in there, get it out. So that's one to do, and it's one of the most expensive to get rid of because it's what we call friable, A-class material. So that's where they have to enclose the room under negative pressure, basically enclose it like a tent, and either cut and drop it or scrape it off.
So in this case, if it's left intact and there's no damage and you keep painted, there shouldn't be a problem. But if there was a leak
Not a
and there
problem there.
was,
Yep.
if there was a leak or an earthquake and it started cracking, then that's a whole different issue, isn't it? It's a health and safety issue.
Yep, that's exactly it. So a leak would be a very common one where that then gets has to be dealt with, and then that's where I say if you've got this management plan in place, you're assuming it to be, you've got a process to deal with that straight away. If you then have to then back foot it and go, oh, now I've got a leak, now I've got to wait for testing results, now I have got this uncertainty for a couple of days, it can be quite stressful for your tenants because they think they're living in a building that could be contaminated because the leak has come through. And yeah, so it's a good one to front foot, even presuming it to be asbestos, dealing with it thing. It's always easier to have it as an asbestos product. Testing comes back as negative, then all of a sudden you can pull back the requirements. So yeah, cool.
Yes.
On to the next photo there.
Yeah, number 8, is it? They called it number 8 corrugated or something?
Super 8 or Super 6. So this is,
Okay.
yeah, I guess technically the material here is a corrugated cement sheeting, very similar to cladding. We often see this also as cladding on buildings. So roofing products like this, very common if you are in, I guess, close to the waterfronts. So a lot of areas around waterfronts, very industrial type product. But in saying that, we do see it on roofs of residential houses. Again, it's probably, if it's looking like that, it's probably coming towards the end of its life. It gets quite brittle, and high winds, it can start to chatter, and very prone to leaking. So that's a product that you want to probably, yeah, get off. Again, has to be removed. If you took the price of a new roof and then doubled it, that would be also your price to remove it as well. So if you've got a $30,000 roof job, you've probably got about a $30,000 removal on there as well. So it doubles the price of your new roof, basically.
So if you're recommending to investor which property to buy, then that's one that we'd probably steer them away from.
Well, that's an interesting question because it depends how you look at it. So if you're an opportunist and you'd say, you know, I mean, that could definitely come into your negotiations on buying the property, and then you're then to make those improvements, you'll see those gains, I suppose. But yeah, if you're buying a property like that and you've got that information, then I guess you can negotiate it at the table. So I definitely wouldn't shy away from buying properties that have asbestos, but as long as you know what you're buying before you do it. So what can happen is people buy a property, then get it surveyed. So what we generally do is we get involved with people during their buying process. One of the conditions of sale is they do a building inspection. They tag onto that an asbestos survey. We can conduct that survey with or without sampling. Then you've got all that information. So when you're buying it, you could assume it to be, but also at the same time, the person selling the property could also then claim that it's not. So that's where you can get into that process. So these are quite a yeah, don't buy houses because they don't have asbestos, because probably the house next door also has it. So yeah. Cool. Yep, so these are flat sheet cement cladding we often see on garages and stuff around those type of properties. In this particular case, there's some good size holes in there. So yeah, I mean that. Yeah, so we would rate that. So we generally on a scale, there's a material risk assessment in those surveys. We score them on the condition. Because of the condition of this thing, it scores it as a higher risk of fibre release. So that debris could also be on the ground. It may be gone or not. So, and it's, again, you've got exposed edges. So yeah, getting them cleaned up, removed, I guess is time. Yeah, I mean, it's time to get them removed. So you could just remove the sheets that are damaged, but at the same time, you may also remove all the cladding and deal with it and refresh the whole garage as it goes. Yep.
Yeah, I've got an issue with that at the moment. Just yesterday, I was at a property and there was a tree growing at the back of this property and was damaged the integrity of the back of the wall. But it's got this stuff, so the builder's taken away some sample to get it tested to see whether it's asbestos or not. Where would a builder take this to get it tested? It has to be at a laboratory, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. So I don't think there's any laboratories that aren't IANZ accredited. Some I don't know of. I mean, people can do it. So there's a couple of IANZ accredited laboratories. They're very. I mean, if you just search online for asbestos testing around laboratories, you can drop them off. There is some concerns around who's collecting the sample. There are some do's and don'ts about how to collect samples. So we have had cases where people have been taking their own samples all the time. Every single sample comes back as positive, and it's just like, that's a bit interesting. What do you use to collect it? And it's the same set of pliers or the same chisel every time using it. So it's a contaminated tool. So they're doing that. So there are some, I suppose, having a qualified person collect the sample, there are some procedures that go around collecting that sample, and also sealing up that sample site as well. So in particular, I'd have some concerns if, I mean, in that case, a cement board's fairly easy to take a sample, but those textured ceilings we talked about, we saw before, someone who's taken those samples really needs to know what they're doing, because you can very easily shower yourself with dust from that sample and contaminate the carpet and then leave it there. So that's quite a more technical procedure. It's not a difficult procedure, but if you don't know what you're doing, you can very easily get in and do stuff. Same with this flooring you've got here. Looks like has it been pulled up there?
Yes, it has been pulled up. I think that it's just to highlight that if you've got old vinyl, you can't just assume that it's okay to pull up. That's one of the key ones.
Yeah, exactly. And so one of the other things we get is on top, that's new vinyl. It was laid in 2005 or something, and it's now going to come up, or there's been a flood in there or something. Often when we're sampling, it's not just the top layer. There can be a bit of a vinyl sandwich in there. In particular, this product, you can see they've pulled it up and you can see that grey paper backing there.
Yeah.
This is probably your worst nightmare situation, because this particular case, I hope this isn't your photo or something, but ripping that up, those fibers all get released and it's been uncontrolled. Those fibers you can't see is what is paper backing is the asbestos product here. Wow. And because you've disturbed it, you've basically let off an asbestos bomb inside that room, and that may be spread throughout the house there. So that's quite an urgent one to isolate that area or not put yourself in that position as well. Very expensive to correct once you've done this, because the dust can be throughout the rest of the property.
Wow. Yeah. And of course, here's our little favorite, our little plastered ceilings that used to be all the rage in the 70s.
Yep. So again, treat them as asbestos until you know. Yeah. So testing. We just went back to do testing before on that. Testing generally costs you somewhere between about $85 and $100 to do a sample on these particular things. Now that's just the lab cost of that. I mean, generally, if someone's coming out, conducting it, driving it to the lab, you may expect to pay a little bit more for their time as well. But that's, I mean, yeah, the scenario where you've got that vinyl up above, $100 to know before you rip into that sort of stuff, those particular cases, we've seen up to $200,000 worth of write-offs in the house. Carpets, couches, curtains, personal items all have to be replaced and have been proven contaminated because of that. Even worse scenario, they then come in and sometimes sanded that paper backing. So yeah, and sometimes that's professionals that have come in as well, like professional flooring people have come in, ripped that up, sanded it, contaminated the house. So, and one of the things I probably should add to that, and again, this isn't to scare people or whatever, but it's probably more to shock you, I suppose, is most people's insurance, most tradespeople's liability insurance, whether they've got 5 million or not, will exclude asbestos. So someone like myself, I have insurance, and we have to go to Lords in London, underwritten by them, for environmental protection insurance. And those policies only will cover for a asbestos, I guess, incident where it should have known better, but it's still happening. I mean, accidents do happen, that happens. But yeah, so yeah, that's another another point there for young players, I suppose, in the asbestos game. It's very easy to find out whether asbestos is in products. Yeah, so more textured ceilings, more cement. That might be your cement sheeting from that garage we had before.
Yeah.
Yep.
These fake bricks, they used to.
Yeah, so fake bricks. So again, we have a couple of, that particular fake brick. That's a little bit different to the other one we saw before. So this one's generally on top of. You'll find that there's probably more and behind that a cement sheet. That's there. Also, another thing that probably gets a little bit missed as well by even asbestos professionals is that bottom cement concrete ring you see down there as well. That's a render product. That skim coat over top of that can also contain asbestos. So again, if you're cutting into that, drilling into that, things like heat pumps, ventilation systems, all those things, if you're cutting through those products, that's when you're disturbing it the most.
Okay. Oh, heck with, here's some more fake brick, and
that's your fake brick. Yep. So yeah, I mean, that product's really not a lot of difference between that and that shed we saw, the damaged stuff. There's your debris on the ground.
Some samples, some more. So
yeah,
and there's the old-fashioned state house there.
Yep. Again, they're not always asbestos, and that's something I should probably stress as well. So they generally look it, and you presume it to be, but this is where we're testing the stuff on a regular basis. We do get negatives on these products, so it's I mean, it's always great if we can come in and test stuff and survey stuff, and it turns out to be negative, because that saves a lot of money. So yeah, so a lot of people just assume stuff and just proceed with full removal and stuff. And often I'd say, look, if you're spending, $10,000 or $20,000 to remove this product, what's a couple of $100 to get it tested, even as confirmation that it is asbestos? In those cases, yeah.
Okay, no, that's good. All right, no, that's great. Just check. We've got some questions coming in, so that's great, Steve. We've done our job there. Yeah, so let's have a look at some of these questions. And one's got, how do I know what asbestos potentially looks like? Well, we've just about done that, haven't we? So,
yep. So pretty much, these are pretty of a rule of thumb that we were always taught. So if it's not glass, steel, or timber, it could contain asbestos. There is about 5,000 materials that can contain asbestos, so it is very, very hard. But anything that's a cement sheeting, anything that's a vinyl, anything that's a textured coating like a plaster, or those sorts of things, generally I would assume that they are asbestos until testing proves otherwise. That's probably a good rule of thumb there.
Here's some good questions. How much on average does a survey cost? Are there any properties age-wise which is unlikely need one? New builds? Well, I think we've covered that. Are there a certain age of properties where it's highly unlikely asbestos is? So it's really the cost of the survey and those that are
Well, I'll answer those. I'll just clarify those things. So anything before about 1940 shouldn't contain it. Asbestos wasn't used in New Zealand on those products. Anything post 2000, also the building regulations specify they didn't do it. So between 1940 and 2000 is your classic thing. Anything constructed generally in the 50s, 60s, and 70s is highly likely to have asbestos. So yeah, treat them with that. One of the other materials I probably should add to that as well, we get a lot of questions on, is the dichromatic roof tiles. So they are a common asbestos product as well. We get a lot of myths that they don't contain it, but they definitely do. We definitely sample them, and we definitely get positives. Not all the time. It's probably 60% of the time it is asbestos. 40% is not. So that's a pretty high statistic that it's not going to be asbestos, but it's something you should do before you start cutting in. Often we've seen a big increase in cutting of those tiles due to ventilation systems going in around properties. Yeah. So how much does the survey cost? Good question. So generally, I would say the cheaper end is about $500 for a visual inspection with no samples. And I would say generally about $1,500 to $2,000 is around about the cost of a more intrusive survey. Maybe up to $2,500 if it was a larger, 5-bedroom standalone house with quite large areas, and that's probably about 10 samples included in that. So yeah, that sort of gives a price range, but it is dependent on the building. We do go through a lot of buildings, and there isn't anything to sample, so it's at the cheaper end, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay, and question, can you give us an example of an asbestos management plan?
Yeah, so example would be, so generally you need to know what's, this is a little bit where it gets confusing for people, because the legislation is set up around the management of asbestos, or the risk that's there. There's nothing in the legislation that says you actually need to conduct a survey. It's the management of it. So you could just assume that because my house is 1960s, I'm going to assume that everything in there is asbestos. But then all of a sudden you handicap yourself, and every time you want to hang something on a wall, or you're going to send a plumber in, or just to fix something, you've got to go through these hoops to do it. So that's where the survey, having a good survey, then eliminates the products that are not asbestos, or confirms the ones that are, I suppose. So generally, in a management plan would tell you where it is. So the easiest way to do that is have a floor plan. The easiest way is to highlight the kitchen floor, for example. The kitchen vinyl floor in here is there. You have inspection dates. So it was carried out today, and it's got procedures in there. So every 12 months, we're going to do another visual inspection on that. So you can do that yourself as a building owner or building manager. Just update that. So cool, here's our original benchmark. There's been no condition change, status quo, just carry it on. And so it's there. And then also that would generally have your emergency procedures in there. So if there was to be a flood, earthquake, all these things, there's damage there, again, you can easily do your own visual inspection on that to confirm that, yep, we're good against what we had. If it wasn't, so you say, so that cement sheet you had in there before that was damaged in that hallway, so to speak of, you go, no, actually there's now some damage. Now you've got some escalation measures. So whether that is to vacate the complete building, or there's somebody to call to deal with that. So you've got a list of, the same way if your hot water cylinder was to blow out in the night type thing, you've got there's procedures there. I'm going to call my plumber, I'm going to move my tenants out, I'm going to do all these sorts of things. So as long as you've got some procedures, there's no right or wrong way on these management plans. You can go to WorkSafe website, and I believe there are some templates in there you can use. Most people who go in there and download them, they do get very confusing. They're a little bit too broad sometimes, which is why it's easy to have. I've got a cement cladding, there it is, it's isolated, nobody's touching it unless I know who's touching it, and if they are touching it, then they know who's touching it, when they're touching it, why they're touching it, and are they trained to deal with what they're doing. So a classic example is, yeah, cool, we've got a heat pump going in, the guys know that it's asbestos, they treat it as that, they've got a special vacuum cleaner, a whole machine and a shroud, it sucks it all out, they've got the equipment to deal with that, they're asbestos trained, it's no big deal. So there are tradespeople out there who can deal with asbestos. The ones that don't generally are the ones you want to avoid. So as soon as you say that we think that's asbestos cladding, we're going to, yeah, they just say, oh, we just cut into it anyway, and we don't really care. So that's the ones that you don't. We all know those tradespeople, so they just get on and get the job done, which is great. But if they don't, if you ask them the question about asbestos, or they just sort of give you a very vague answer, that's the perfect time to say stop. Well, actually, in this case, maybe we were just presuming it to be asbestos. That's where we need to stop those tradespeople causing you some extra costs. Yeah.
Okay, I've got a good question here, is because I've heard it myself. We're told or hear from owners or others that you can do 10 square meters yourselves with PPE. How true is this?
Yep, so it's true. There is a bit of a provision or a loophole in the legislation. So there's a bit more to the statement. So you can up to 10 square meters work on material. However, there is bonded or non-friable materials, and there's friable materials. So, for example, the bonded materials are those cement claddings, those textured ceilings we saw on there as well. They're your friable stuff. So all the friable stuff, the vinyls that we saw that was pulled up, that stuff is that is 0 square meters. The other stuff is there. So the rule is actually there so a normal tradesperson who has some knowledge can still access emergency repairs. That's what the legislation, that's why it's there. Up to 10 square meters is you still need to abide by the code of practice with all the asbestos. So you still need to really know what you're doing. Having PPE is great, but PPE is generally a last resort. So generally, if we're wearing a respirator and cover overalls for PPE, it's not to protect us from the dust, it's a last resort. If we haven't controlled all that dust to start with, that is our last resort. So just pulling off cladding and having PPE on isn't really what we class as best practice. The knowledge that goes with that, it's not secret knowledge. So I mean, if you had one sheet on a garage that needed to be removed, if you were able to wet that down, you had plastic down on the ground, you're able to pull that off, you had a vacuum cleaner to then clean out all the nail holes and all the cavities and stuff, then there's nothing to stop you doing that yourself. So yeah, so up to 10 square meters. Another thing that kind of gets added onto that, it's like, oh, well, if I do 9 square meters today and 9 square meters tomorrow and 9 square meters at the weekend, am I allowed to do that? And the answer is no. Technically, no. It's total work on that house is up to 10 square meters. I would generally say if you've got up to 10 square meters of work that needs to be done, that's where your licensed professionals would come in and take that away from you. It just means it doesn't have to be notified to WorkSafe. There's no up to 10 square meters, doesn't have to be, they're not notifiable works. So therefore, it doesn't have to be, there's no WorkSafe involvement, but the process of removing it should still always be identical. Whether you're removing it yourself or professionals are doing it, there is a process and a procedure for best practice to remove asbestos.
Right.
Yeah.
Question, how do you, apart from, of course, trace asbestos, how do you choose a reliable contractor for asbestos removal? Are there any specific certifications we should look for?
So that's for removal, was it?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. So probably just clarify here. So I am trace asbestos, but I only do the surveying and the testing and the clearances at the end. So in the middle sits what's called a licensed removalist. So yeah, so it's a good question. So I get this all the time. We're quite hard to answer this question because we're supposed to be independent. So we technically work for the whoever owns the building, but we also work for the removalist to make sure they're done. So we're sort of like the referee in the middle, I suppose, between the two parties. So we're supposed to be independent. So for myself to go, oh yes, I recommend this person to remove it, that could be classed as a conflict of interest because that's my mate. I'm getting a financial kickback or something from there. So this is where it becomes quite a grey area in New Zealand. So the best way to answer this question, licensed, you need to be licensed to be a removalist. You need to be qualified to be a surveyor, and you need to be licensed to be an assessor for those 3 parts. The licensed part on WorkSafe website, you can see the register and see who they are. So that's a fairly easy thing to do. You can Google a company, a couple of removal companies, and then go onto WorkSafe and verify their names on there, what their license holders, what they are, who their supervisors are. The best recommendation I can get from those removalists is just to ask them, can I have a couple of references from previous jobs or from your clients, or is there somebody else who can recommend them? And that's generally where it probably sits with, and I guess you could say that for any tradespeople. If you're getting good recommendations on word of mouth, then that's probably a good spot to go with. Yeah.
Okay. So that's good. We're down to the last question, and it's a bit.
Yep.
But she'd like to know, how often are you seeing stuff-ups from Chorus installing fibre before they get proper permission to store all their, over this? Do you have any incidents like that, or Is it a situation where it's such a small area, then it doesn't apply?
Yeah, I had a chorus guy. I can probably only comment on my own property here. I don't like to say bad things about companies, but yeah, someone at probably chorus needs to get their procedures up pretty good. So I have an asbestos house, and before I even knew what they were doing, they just drilled the fibre through the cladding. So that worker has put themselves at risk. They've then contaminated the area and just do it. So yeah, it's a hard one because we've then also had people who just want to get their fibre installed, and it's like we're stopping them doing that. It's like, I'm not trying to stop people. I'm just trying to give everybody the best advice. So they really shouldn't be drilling into cement sheeting or that fake brick stuff, all those ideas. They shouldn't be doing it unless, very simply, they have a vacuum cleaner that they can put over top and do that. For some reason, they don't have those procedures in place. So legally, they're breaking the law. And what's probably worse about it is the technician out on site generally isn't aware of what they're doing. I don't quite understand why the company and the worker, there's no education in there. So if you have one of them at your property, you're trying to want to get the fibre installed other alternate ways. So that,
and this
yeah.
is definitely the last one because we've run out of time, but
Yep.
if you remove up to 10 square meters of potential asbestos product, where can you dispose of it?
Right. So that's another very good question. So generally, this is where most people do fail on the 10 square meter rule, or up to 10 square meters, because you can't just rock up to a normal waste facility. So within your local area, there will be a special zone. Generally, though, this is where it's quite heavily restricted. That material generally needs to be booked in 24 hours in advance. You're going to bring it in, how much you're going to bring it in, where you're bringing it in from. So there's all these questions that go with it. So most people, it stops people there. So you're going to get a lot of questions on who's removed it, how it's been done. But effectively, a licensed removalist takes it to a waste facility. So I'm in Wellington. We have, very close to me is the Silverstream dump. Silverstream dump would be 24 hours in advance, booked in. You then deliver it. You have to have procedures to unload it, and then it's placed into a special zone at the dump. Right at the back of it, it's buried 5 meters deep, and that's where it goes. And you're weighed as you go in and weighed as you come out. Now, another thing there also, generally you're charged per ton, or sometimes there's a half tonnage. So whether you've got 10 square meters or 1 ton, you're going to be paying the 1 ton rate. So the disposal of that material gets quite hard. So again, that's where you'd call up a licensed removalist. They'll add it to their waste, come pick it up for you. Even to the point, like even someone like myself or even a licensed removalist, generally, if you're going to remove it yourself, can give you some of the equipment, the pre-bags that can be put into. It's got to be double wrapped. It's got to be labelled. There's quite a few processes that go with the disposal of asbestos, which is the same as removing the cladding. So again, it's an area where a lot of people do think 10 square meters, I can do it myself, but you've got to know all those procedures, and getting rid of the asbestos is one of it. It's not there to stop people removing their own asbestos. It's just to control where it's going and how it's going in. And so it seems to be a very effective way at stopping a lot of people removing their own asbestos, because a little bit of knowledge sometimes is dangerous.
All right. Well, we've definitely run out of time and gone over, but it's very, very informative. And thank you very much, Steve, for giving your time and explaining that to people.
Welcome, thanks for having me.
I think it was very, very worthwhile. So again, thank you. And thank you for those who participated online, or those who'll see it in the future. So yeah, we're getting some good comments at the bottom there. So yeah, thank you, Steve, and we'll call it Sonara, and have a good rest of the day.
Cool, thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.